welcome. Sheet Geek here. First video in a long time. It's been a few months, but this is a good one. It's one that you can use in a spreadsheet class or in a finance class. I use it in both. Spreadsheets is great for looking at functions and formulas and absolute cell references. In a finance class, I love that it talks about costs of transportation and how much it actually costs you to drive a vehicle from a gas perspective. So does a lot of good stuff. Okay, so let's get into how this works. I got a new blank spreadsheet here. The title is fuel costs. In the top row, I'm just going to type a title for this project, fuel cost calculator. Hit enter, and then in row 2, I'm going to type my column headings. What I need for this is I need some vehicle information. So that's going to go in cell A2. In cell B2, I need the city MPG, the highway MPG. In cell D2, I'm going to calculate the average MPG. This will be calculated. If I know all of that, I'm going to be able to figure out how many gallons of gas I need per month. So I'll do gallons needed per month. I'm going to hit tab. And then in cell F2, it doesn't look empty, but there's nothing in cell F2. It's just letting it overflow from E2. I'm going to figure out my total costs, total fuel cost per month. Okay. I'm going to leave column G empty. Over in column H, cell H2, I'm just going to type the word assumptions. Beneath that, I'm going to have to make a couple assumptions about my driving habits. Number 1 is how many miles I drive per month. So I'll put miles driven. And I'm also going to need to make an assumption about the price of gas. So the price per gallon. And for now, I'm just going to put a couple assumptions in here, but we're going to play with these later. I'm going to assume that we drive 1,000 miles per month. So I'll put 1,000 there in cell I3, and that my price per gallon at the time of filming in Michigan, gas is running about $3.69 a gallon. So that's what I'm going to put. But this is something that you should check out and look up. It's really easy to find online, or just pay attention as you're driving around. I'm going to do a little formatting with these columns. Column A needs to be about twice as wide, so I'm going to stretch that and make it about twice as wide. Columns B, C, and D, I'm going to click on the column header and highlight the whole header. Those need to be not very wide at all, so I'll bring that down a little bit in width. I'm going to turn word wrapping on in row 2, so I'm going to click on the 2, and I'm going to go to Format, do Wrapping, and do Wrap. So then it'll stack those column headers on 2 lines. Everything else looks... There's a typo here that I'll fix. Gallons needed per month. I'll make that a little bit wider, so we're okay here. So then what we're going to have to do is we're going to find some vehicles, and I'm going to type in 6 vehicles. And usually what I'll have my students do for this is I'll have them look for some used cars that they might be interested in purchasing and list them here. I'm going to list 6 vehicles. And sometimes if you find a listing, it'll tell you the fuel efficiency of the vehicle, how many MPGs it gets in the city and on the highway. If it doesn't, you can look those up on fuelefficiency.gov, fuelefficiency.gov, and you can find that information there. It's not, sometimes when you research these, different engines will have different trim packages that might change the miles per gallon a little bit, but I don't think it's super important. Usually it's going to be pretty close either way. We're just getting a good estimate here. So I'm entering some vehicles with kind of a variety of fuel efficiencies. We'll throw a Toyota Prius in there, which gets 50 miles per gallon in the city and 46 on the highway. So we've got some actual fuel efficiency data. I've got 6 vehicles in here that are all used cars, kind of, not too old, but not too new or anything. Sometimes I'll have my students use maybe a budget of like $10,000, something that works and something that's realistic, depending on your student base. For average MPGs, this is something I'll have them calculate. And in cell D3, there's 2 ways you can do this. One way is to start with the equal sign and to do a formula. Parentheses are important here. I'm going to add the city plus the highway, B3 plus C3, close my parentheses, and divide that by 2. Add them both up, cut them in half, and my Ford Focus has an average MPG of 35.5. I'm not going to do the autofill yet. The other way you could do this is by using the average function. Equals average, open parentheses. It's suggesting B4 through C4. That's a great suggestion. If you wanted to do it manually, you could highlight those 2 numbers and close your parentheses and hit enter. But that also just adds those 2 numbers up and divides by 2. Either way is better. Either way is fine. If I just have 2 numbers, the formula's not much harder than the function. But the average function is better if you're adding a bunch of numbers together. So then I'm going to take the average function, which works for this one. I'm going to use that little dot, that fill handle, and drag it down for all 6 vehicles. The gallons needed per month. So now I know that I'm going to be driving 1,000 miles. That's my assumption. And that if I use the Ford Focus, every gallon of gas is going to give me 35.5 miles. So to do this formula, I'm going to say equals. I'm going to click on that 1,000, which is in cell I3. I'm going to divide by the 35.5, which is in cell D3. Now, I don't want to keep typing this formula in. I'm going to want to copy this formula down for all 6 vehicles. The problem with doing that is when I copy it down, D3 is going to change to D4 and D5 and D6, and that's good because I have different MPGs for each vehicle. However, if I copy this down, the I3 is going to change. That's also going to move down, and it's going to go from 1,000 miles to 3.69 miles to 000. So I really don't want that I3 moving when I copy the formula. So this is a good place for an absolute cell reference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click inside my formula, and I'm going to put a $sign in front of the I, $sign in front of the 3. Those $signs in front of the cell reference say always look at column I and row 3. Don't change that if you move the formula. So this is what my formula looks like. $sign I, $sign 3 divided by D3. You actually don't need the $sign in front of the I, but it doesn't hurt to have it there either. I'm going to hit enter. It's going to suggest an autofill, which is a good idea. I'm going to check this and accept that. I'm going to show my formulas on the screen for a second, and you can see what happens. The I3, when I did that autofill, I3 stays I3 all the way down. D3 changes to D4 and D5 and D6 all the way through D8, and that's good. Bring my results back. This is a bunch of decimals, probably more than I need, so I'll highlight those cells, and I'm going to decrease my decimal places. Probably 1 decimal place here is good. So if I were to purchase that Ford Focus, drive 1,000 miles a month, it's going to need to use 28 gallons of gas to get me 1,000 miles. If I drive that Ford F-150, it's going to need 47 gallons of gas to get me the same 1,000 miles. So how much is all that going to cost me? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to take those gallons for the Ford Focus. That's 28.2 gallons, which is in cell E3, and I'm going to multiply it by the price of gas, $3.69. That's in cell I4. I'm going to want to copy this formula down for all 6 of those vehicles. If I copy this formula down, E3 is going to change to E4, E5, E6, so on and so forth. That's great. If I copy it down the way I have it right now, I4 is going to change to I5 and I6. I don't want that to happen. I want it to stay in row 4. So I'm going to put a $sign in front of the 4. That says when you copy it, stay in row 4. I could put a $sign in front of the I, but I don't need to. This is actually called a mixed cell reference. The I is relative, the 4 is absolute. It just means it's always going to stay in row 4. If I hit enter, it's going to suggest an autofill. Whoop, I missed my opportunity. So I'm just going to grab this fill handle and drag it down. Oh, I don't know what I did. I'm going to undo a couple things. And I'll drag this down again. There we go. So this is my fuel cost per month. This is a monetary value, so I'm going to highlight these cells. I'm going to use the quick currency format so that I get a nice currency format. So what this shows me is that if I choose to drive that Ford F-150 and I drive 1,000 miles per month and I have to pay $3.69 a gallon, I'm going to have to spend $175 to get that 1,000 miles. If I drive the Toyota Prius, it's only going to cost me $76. So that's a pretty big difference. If you want to figure out that difference, one thing that you could do down below your data, you could do the highest, the lowest, and the difference. To figure out the highest here in cell F10, I could use the max function equals max, open my parentheses. I'm going to highlight those cells F3 through F8, close my parentheses and hit enter. It shows me that the highest number is 175, which I could see pretty easily, but it's nice to use the function, and I'll show you why in a second. The lowest, I can use equals min. That's the minimum function. And then I'll highlight those same cells, F3 through F8, close my parentheses and hit enter. Shows that the minimum is 76.88, which is also pretty easy to see. I'm not going to autofill that. To figure out the difference, I'm just going to take the equals the highest minus the lowest, F10 minus F11. I'm going to hit enter. So what this shows me is that with these vehicles that I've chosen, if I drive 1,000 miles a month and it's $3.69 a gallon, the vehicle that's going to cost me the most would cost me $175. The vehicles that's going to cost me the least is $76. So that's a difference of about $100 a month that I would save if I chose the cheapest vehicle instead of the most expensive in terms of fuel efficiency. Now, the reason we set up these assumptions all along was so that we could eventually maybe play with them. So we just assumed 1,000 miles per month, but it might be good to put a more realistic number in there. Maybe you figure out your driving habits and you figure you will actually only drive 800 miles per month. If I change that assumption to 800 and hit enter, you should see all of your data change with it. At 800 miles per month, the difference between the most expensive and the least expensive is only $79 a month. If you drive a lot more, let's say I drive 1,500 miles per month and I hit enter, that difference turns into a $148 difference. Your most expensive vehicle now is going to cost you $263. And we all know the price of gas changes a lot too. So if the price of gas were to suddenly jump to $4.29 a gallon, and I change that price per gallon, that allows me to see what effect that is going to have. So at 1,500, a lot of driving with a much higher price of gas, the difference between the most expensive vehicle and the least expensive is $172 per month. If things are a lot cheaper in terms of driving habits, only 800 miles per month, and gas was a lot cheaper, like $3.29 a gallon, that difference is only $70. So this is something worth checking out when you're looking for a car, because that's a number that's going to hit you in the pocketbook. And this spreadsheet does a nice job of showing you really how much effect do your driving habits have, does the price of gas have, and how much effect does the different fuel efficiency of the vehicles you're considering have. So that's all of the math. That gives me some good data to work with. It's a nice, useful tool. If you want to do some formatting, here's what I might do to format. I might take this title and stretch it across the whole range of use here, A through I, and then use merging to merge those together. As a title, I might bump it up to maybe twice as big or so, size 22, maybe make it bold, center it. My column headers, usually for something like this, I might make those bold and centered. This assumption section, I might highlight these two cells and merge those two cells together. And then for assumptions, a lot of times I like to make this little assumption section stand out. One way you can do that is by shading it and putting a border around it to kind of call that out as an assumption section. Other shading, if you want to do other shading, you could do that. I could use that same color for, as long as I remember what color it was, that same color for maybe my title, maybe my column headers. Column G, if I wanted to make that smaller, I could do that. That space looks awkward, so I'm going to fill that in as well. So it's the same color. So then maybe these would be in bold because that's kind of some summary data that you have. But you've got yourself a useful spreadsheet here. One last thing you might want to do is if you want to do a graph, you could select those vehicles that you have. That's cells A3 through A8. And then if I hold down my control button on my keyboard, I can also select F3 through F8. And if you want to do a graph of this, you could insert a chart really quickly. Insert chart. And it's going to guess which type of chart I want. Vertical bar graph. That's good to me. You can customize over here if you want, but I'm just going to close that chart editor. We'll move that chart into a maybe an empty place on my spreadsheet. Zoom out just a little bit. So now you have a chart. What's nice about these assumptions too is if these change, I change that back to 1,000 miles per month, hit enter, you should see your chart change too. Everything changes, the highest, the lowest, the difference, the fuel cost per month of each vehicle. They all really depend on those assumptions. So whenever those assumptions change, everything changes with it. So this is a good tool for checking out what effect some different vehicles are going to have on how much it's going to cost you per month in gas. So hopefully this is helpful. For students, I think this is a great tool to make informed decisions. For teachers, hopefully this lesson is something that works well in either a spreadsheet class or a personal finance class or some combination of the two. Thanks for watching. If you like this, please check out the rest of the videos on the channel. There's lots of spreadsheet lessons. Hopefully you find something that works for you. Thanks.